Hey there, hunters. Welcome back to Superfan Natural. We're doing something a little different today. This is actually an old video that I made for a different channel. I just thought it was really fun to make, and I wanted to try giving it a second life on this channel, so I hope you enjoy it, and I'm sorry for sounding like I'm half dead through the whole thing. Also, unfortunately, this vid's going to be audio only, because the original version got copyright claimed into absolute oblivion, and I really just don't want to have to deal with that, so audio only this time. Good day and welcome to Look What You Learned, the most existent channel on the internet. I'm the fourth to last son of Krypton, but you can just call me Jack. Learners, I've got to tell you something shocking. I'm a geek. I know. You're shocked and probably appalled, but it's true. In particular, I'm a big fan of superheroes, both DC and Marvel, and a few others. I like a lot of superheroes, but one that is and always has been near the top of my list is the Man of Steel, the red-blue blur, the actual original superhero, Superman. I don't think I need to explain who Superman is. He's not only one of the most famous superheroes, he's among the most famous fictional characters. Almost everything about him is iconic, from his symbol to his color scheme, to his theme music and more. However, of all the things that Superman is known for, few are as popular as his powers. While our boy Kal-El has had a whole lot of powers, like a whole lot of powers over the years, some being extremely ridiculous, there are a few that have cemented themselves as a permanent part of not only Soup's power set, but the powers of characters based off of him. You know what powers I'm talking about. Things like being bulletproof, flying around, laser vision, super strength, super blowing. Things like that. You see him in Superman and you see him in the characters based off of Superman. But how do they work? That's a question that's been asked and answered by many people over the years, but today I'm going to take a crack at it and put my own little spin on the science of Superman. Well, science in big quotation marks. I'm going to draw from real-world science to a certain degree, but there's still going to be a lot of comic book logic, because obviously there's just really not a way to make it make perfect sense. Also, like I said, he's had a ton of different powers over the years, but I'm only going to focus on the ones that are consistently part of his power set, so unfortunately, that means no super weaving, no memory erasing kiss, and no mini-me blasts. To begin, we need to cover a few basics. Superman's powers come from the fact that he's an alien, specifically a Kryptonian from the planet Krypton. His powers aren't unique to him. All Kryptonians have them. Not just humanoid ones either. Kryptonians may look almost identical to humans, heck they can even have kids with humans, but they have a few key differences to keep in mind. Kryptonians actually absorb solar radiation into their cells in a way that humans don't. It's not entirely clear what the original purpose of this was, but it seems like their cells use solar radiation as a source of energy or fuel similar to plants. However, I believe that unlike plants, Kryptonian cells use the photons, or some fictional product of solar energy, to power themselves directly. I also think that as they absorb and process these photons or whatever, they produce small fields of fictional force that are responsible for maintaining the cell's integrity and bonding them together to form tissue. We'll call these bioelectric fields. Those are the basics of Kryptonian physiology. They absorb sunlight and that gives them powers. Pretty simple, but there's obviously more to it than that. For starters, on their home planet of Krypton, they don't really have any superpowers, at least not compared to humans. They're basically as strong as us, they can't fly or shoot heat beams, they need to eat, breathe, and sleep, and they're not super ventriloquists. You get the picture. They basically only have enough power to survive. That's because red dwarf stars like Rao only give off enough energy for basic survival. However, if a Kryptonian is exposed to the light from a star that gives off much more energy, like say a yellow G dwarf star like Sol, they absorb so much energy that their natural abilities get cranked up to 11,000. This isn't even a feature that's exclusive to the humanoid Kryptonians, as Krypto the Superdog also absorbs sunlight and can gain superpowers on Earth. This suggests to me that the sun-eating power is an adaptation that first appeared in early cellular organisms and became a key feature of development of life on Krypton. However, over time, different selection pressures caused life to evolve in a way that's shockingly similar to life on Earth. Kryptonians also have several unique organs that humans don't, and while I don't know if it's ever been specified what they all do, I personally think that at least one of them is used to give Kryptonians a level of direct control over the solar energy and bioelectric fields in their body. Now, I'll admit that I'm doing a lot of speculating here, but you have to remember that this is my channel and I'll do whatever I want. Also, some of my speculation will make sense later. Alright, now that we've gotten through that basic primer on Kryptonian biology, I'm going to take those basics and use them to explain why Superman has certain powers on Earth. We'll start with a broad category that I call physical powers, his strength and speed and durability. How does extra sunlight make Superman bulletproof and strong enough to lift buildings? After all, humans use sugar as fuel, but after eating my daily 100 crunch bars, I'm usually not able to punch through concrete, so what gives? Recall that I speculated that as Kryptonians absorb sunlight, they produce fields of force that help keep their cells together? Well, as Superman takes in more light than he needs for survival, those bioelectric fields grow and merge until they form a field of energy that encompasses his entire body. This is called the bioelectric aura, and while I might be speculating about its exact origin and function, the aura itself is actually a canonical part of Superman's biology, and is used to explain some of his powers. In some continuities anyway. I believe that the aura reinforces the bonds that hold his cells and tissue together, and as a result his bones, muscles, and organs can take much more punishment without breaking apart. This means that not only can Superman take a heck of a lot of force, he can also dish it out. As such, Supes can lift, squeeze, punch, and probably bite through things with significantly more force, since he doesn't have to worry about his bones exploding. However, that doesn't fully explain his strength. After all, even if your fist is completely unbreakable, the force of your punch is still limited by the amount of force generated by your muscles. I think when the individual bioelectric fields in Soup's body overflow and merge into the aura, he's somehow able to use the cell-to-cell interactions to manipulate his muscles in a way beyond normal nerve signaling. This allows him to contract his muscles faster, with more force, and in ways he normally couldn't. Combine that with those muscles' ability to stay intact under pressure, and you get a body that's super strong, super fast, and also super dexterous. Alright, let's move away from the body as a whole and focus on one area in particular, the eyes. Superman has a lot of vision-based powers. The Kryptonian visual prowess easily rivals that of the Uchiha and the Hyuga. Of all his eye-based abilities, none are as well-known or dangerous as his heat vision. It's also sometimes called laser vision, which may seem like an unimportant distinction, but heat and lasers are two related but very different things. So, what are these beams exactly? They're visible and they bounce off of reflective surfaces like a laser, but they have a concussive force and they don't move at the speed of light. Also, sometimes Superman can use a much weaker version that doesn't form visible beams. I'm pretty sure what we're dealing with here is actually a bit of both. I think what our boy is actually shooting from his peepers are extra photons that he's drawing from the reserves of solar energy in his body. He's somehow able to direct these out of his body through his eye holes, and by using a combination of super and regular muscle control, is able to shape lenses in his eyes in order to focus them into tight beams. Now, it's possible that the reason these eye beams are visible is because he's focusing the photons into a coherent stream like a real laser. However, I'm going to propose an explanation that's a little spicier. You have to remember that these aren't wimpy little light beams that you use to mess with your cat, although research says you probably shouldn't do that because it kind of just frustrates them. Kryptonian heat vision can melt steel and blow craters in the earth. They're really powerful and carry a hell of a lot of energy. I believe that what we're actually visibly seeing is the air around the beams heating to the point that it glows like a fire poker. This is why they don't move at the speed of light. The photons do, but the actual air and anything else that they hit take a few seconds to heat up. But why are they coming out of his eyes? Why not his hands or his butt or his sexy kneecaps? Well, I believe it's because this is a supercharged version of another natural bodily function of Kryptonians. Not laser eyes, mind you. Well, kind of, I guess. I think Kryptonians have a natural ability to vent extra solar energy out of their eyes. Think of it like vomiting. You eat too much food for your stomach to handle and you have to hack it up so your body doesn't get overwhelmed. It's the same with Superman and his primary food source, sweet, tangy sunlight. Whatever its purpose, I'm tempted to believe that this is another function that evolved not in modern Kryptonians, but a distant ancestor. This is supported by a couple of things. Firstly, again, Krypto has this power, so it's not something specific to humanoids. Secondly, and this is important, if Kryptonians had a limit to how much energy they could absorb, they wouldn't be able to gain superpowers. No, I think that this is a vestigial function adapted by an ancestor that used solar energy but couldn't store it as efficiently. Modern Kryptonians don't really need this ability, and in fact many probably don't even know they have it. On Earth, however, Superman gets more than enough energy, and while he doesn't need to laser vomit, he can if he wants to. Heat vision is Superman's most famous eye-based power, but it's definitely not his only one. He's had all manner of supervisions over each era, but there are 3 that have become a part of his regular power set: telescopic, microscopic, and X-ray vision. These allow Clark to see, well, basically anything, no matter how far away, small, or hidden it is. The first 2 are actually pretty easy to explain using what we've already established. His body is supercharged with energy, and his muscles are able to contract more powerfully and in special ways, and maybe Kryptonian eyes are subtly different than humans. That all can make sense. However, X-ray vision is a little different. The name implies that it works like real X-ray imaging on Earth, which would mean that he's not only shooting out X-rays, but is somehow reabsorbing them on the other side of the target, which is probably not the case. In recent years, the comics have changed the explanation by saying that Superman can actually see the entire electromagnetic spectrum, including some forms of fictional light or energy, or whatever, and that his brain is able to take in all that information and is able to map out what's going on the other side of things. That's a fine explanation, but it does cause one little problem. If it's just a matter of anatomy, then why do Kryptonians only have this power under a yellow sun? Remember how I theorized that Superman uses special lenses in his eyes to focus his heat vision? I think that the normal function of these lenses is to refract incoming light in such a way that causes only the visible light to reach the photoreceptors. See, I believe that while Kryptonian eyes have photoreceptors capable of absorbing and interpreting most forms of light, these cells are actually kind of fragile and will burn out quickly when exposed to anything outside the visible spectrum. These lenses are an adaptation that help extend the life of the eyes so that Kryptonians can keep their vision beyond the age of, 3. That's enough about the eyes. Let's now talk about how Superman blows. Superman's breath powers, super breath and freeze breath, sometimes called Arctic breath, are 2 of his lesser used abilities, but also 2 of his more scientifically explainable powers. For his super blowing, it's literally just a matter of him being able to take in more air and expel it with much, much more force. It's possible that Kryptonians naturally have a greater lung capacity than humans, allowing them to take in more air, but regardless, Superman is able to take in more air because he doesn't need to worry about his lungs bursting. He's also able to use his super strong muscles to expel that air rapidly and forcefully enough to create a gale force wind if he wants. If he doesn't want to literally blow someone away and instead wants them to just chill, all he has to do is form a smaller, tighter seal, and the air he blows out will pressurize, rapidly expand, and cool, and this cold air will rapidly cool water vapor, causing it to condense and ultimately freeze. This is a real-world phenomenon, it's just that it usually doesn't cause things to be encased in a layer of ice. Alright, now it's time for the big one, the main event, the most iconic Superman power. How is Superman able to fly? There have been several explanations over the years, such as him manipulating gravity and the idea that he's actually just jumping and falling with style. Sometimes it's more of a psychic or spiritual thing. The theories and explanations abound. I decided to make this video interesting by coming up with my own theory, and I think I have one that makes a little bit of sense. Like most of this video, the answer lies in early Kryptonian evolution. I propose that after the development of solar absorption, the next big mutation, or series of mutations to take place in early cellular organisms, caused their bioelectric fields to take on a kind of quote-unquote charge based on their energy needs. Stick with me on this one. When the cell was low on energy, the field would become positively charged and would cause the cell to be pulled towards higher concentrations of electromagnetic radiation. Then, when the cell is full and in danger of bursting, the charge becomes negative and pushes them towards lower concentrations of energy. On a side note, this feature could have played a role in the development of multicellular life and could also possibly be the mechanism behind heat vision. Anyway, eventually evolution caused Kryptonian ancestors to be too big and complex for this charge to move, and later they became capable of taking in and storing much more energy, basically making this a completely vestigial feature. However, under a yellow sun, not only can Superman consciously activate and direct this mechanism, he has enough energy to supercharge it to the point that it does move his body. Essentially, I'm proposing that when Superman launches off of the ground, he's not pushing himself off of the Earth, he's pulling himself towards or pushing away from another source of electromagnetic radiation, like the sun or another distant star. By carefully manipulating the power of this push-pull interaction, he's able to move in any direction he wants and can even hover in midair. Does that make any kind of sense? I know it's kind of a weird explanation, but I don't know, I think it's kind of fun. Alright, before I wrap up, there's one more power I need to talk about because it's my favorite one-off bullshit power. I call it Rebuild the Great Wall of China Vision. So in the movie Superman 4, iconic villain Nuclear Man blows up part of the Great Wall of China, and in response, Supes shoots it with these weird blue beams from his eyes, and the wall rebuilds itself. They don't explain what it is, but I have a few theories. The first is simple. In the Reeves movies, Kryptonians occasionally have these weird telekinetic tractor beam lasers that they can shoot out of their eyes. It's possible that this is just a combination of that and super speed. However, the idea that I find much more fun actually has to do with the end of the first movie, when he somehow rewinds time by flying around the world. I like to think he's managed to somehow concentrate that power into a beam, and it only works on the Great Wall of China. It wouldn't be the weirdest power he's ever had. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. I don't think this will be a regular thing, but who knows? Either way, there'll be more supernatural content for you soon, so carry on.